Okay.
Well, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight or this evening for this webinar. We're very excited to talk about AI and love the energy around Data Cloud and Agent Force in the room, and really kind of just the latest and greatest stuff of what Salesforce is doing. So here today we're going to talk about how AI is augmenting Salesforce implementations and delivery, whether for consulting firms or for Salesforce teams within organizations, or even independent consultants that are kind of doing freelance work out there. We think AI can definitely help and augment your workflows as well. So that's just a quick high level. I'll do a quick round of introductions. Actually, I'll ask you to give a quick intro, and then I'll give a quick introduction as well.
Yeah, sure. So, hello everyone. Very excited to meet you all here. I'm the co-founder of a Gen AI startup called Cluebot Inc. And we are basically part of the accelerator program called Alchemist in the Bay Area. And before this, I have a 15 years work ex in B2B sales. I was in consulting roles for multiple years, and I also have another startup which I had started 5 years back. So this is my second startup, and specifically in the Salesforce ecosystem. I'm just like many of you. I'm also new to the system because I've had traditional experiences in manufacturing and various services industries, and this is my startup which I'm focusing with Salesforce to begin with. But glad we could connect. Yeah, Omar, over to you.
Thank you, Akshay, for that introduction. Again, everybody, my name is Omar Yusuf. I've actually been in the Salesforce space close to a decade, but as many folks, you tend to stumble into the world of Salesforce, and just the community around Salesforce has been so forgiving and helpful as we all kind of navigate our journey. So, in doing so, I've spent time delivering projects at some of the largest organizations, and a lot of those pain points that I've experienced as an analyst, as a functional consultant, as a delivery lead, continue to repeat themselves at different client sizes, different organizations, and it felt like there needs to be a better solution to some of these gaps. And this is kind of where Cluebot came into the equation. So I'm an advisory, I provide advisory and support to the Cluebot team, and just kind of providing some of that Salesforce expertise. But today we're going to be covering what it is AI, and how does it go into the world of delivery, software delivery, and more specifically Cluebot. And we'll go from there. So jumping right in, I kind of covered this briefly. So we'll go over the current state of Salesforce project delivery. How is AI augmenting software delivery? We'll talk a little bit about Cluebot and how it fits within this whole equation. And then we'll go into a little bit of a case study, a day in the life of a BA solution architect, and how these types of tools can really help increase efficiency. And then I think the most exciting part will be the live product demo, and we'd like to leave some time at the end to ask for folks to ask questions. Also, feel free to ask questions during the session. I like to have a conversational experience. I don't like to talk for too long to people, or you can put questions in the comments as well. So happy to kind of Akshay will keep track of the comments for us, and we'll make sure to answer any of those questions. Alrighty, so before we get in, I want to go on the record and say I think we might have coined a new term. Right? We've all heard of DevOps, RevOps, all these terms, but I truly believe ArcOps is the next phase of kind of management and governance and discipline around architecture of systems. And what I mean by that, ArcOps, right? It's a noun. As defined, the operational discipline of system architecture. But really, when we think of kind of all the documentation, I can't tell you how many times I've seen customers say, "Oh, yeah, we have documentation, but it hasn't been updated in 3 years." Right? That's always a recurring thing. Or yeah, we're focused on agile, so we don't really do a lot of documentation. And a lot of times, we can probably all relate to some of these pain points and issues, and kind of the lack of institutionalized knowledge within organizations that often cripples the growth and the creation of more tech debt and lack of knowledge sharing within these organizations. But just wanted to kind of put that out there. Anybody take claim to ArcOps before me? I'm happy to take my claim back, but if not, we'll say we coined it. Alrighty. So jumping right in, I wanted to really quickly kind of walk through the end-to-end SDLC, whether it's from a consulting firm perspective or even a company implementing Salesforce. A lot of these steps are pretty much consistent. I'm not planning on covering every single box. I think that'll take too long. But I want to cover a few key points just around some of the pain points and issues that I've personally seen in my own career, and I've heard others kind of describe as we were figuring out what is the key focus of Cluebot. One of the biggest points of failure, in my opinion, especially in the consulting world, is once you have your sales team sell a project, and between that and kicking off to the delivery team, there often is a lot of knowledge and information that could be shared that ultimately doesn't get shared, or there's a lack of documentation or limited information that's provided, kind of providing a two-team experience to a customer. So a lot of times organizations say, hey, we are one team, but in reality, you're giving two experiences to the customer, asking the same questions twice, providing more than what was in scope. So there's a lot of areas around sales to delivery and the transition between those two separate teams that creates a lot of friction with all the tribal knowledge that the sales folks have. During this period, right, as you're kind of transitioning from sales to delivery, you're also ramping up teams, right? A lot of organizations today are having to staff folks on projects, even when the right folks are not even available. They're having to kind of figure out, how do we manage kicking off this project at the time that we said we would kick it off with the limited skills and talent that we have in house. So a lot of times they'll start off with a small subset of the team, and over time adding additional folks as they are being either onboarded from other projects or they're new hires. So what oftentimes happens is there's a lot of incomplete requirements during that initial period of the project. A lot of documentation is obviously manually created, and it's pretty much bespoke per project. That creates a lot of inconsistency across different projects. Different teams will create different outputs. What's called a BRD here might look a little bit different for this next project. How we estimate the level of effort here might be different from this other project. And that creates gaps in how we give our clients the right experience. Now, thinking about this from the perspective of a Salesforce customer or an internal IT group, their customer is the business stakeholders. So in the same fashion, making sure that the experience with the business and that trust is built is very critical to ensuring that the understanding of their requirements are captured and what they're looking to do. So oftentimes there's a mismatch between what the business actually wants versus what the IT team understands, and the speed to value or the lack thereof of speed to value ultimately results. During the period of discovery and architecture, we broke it up into two sections because there is an upfront portion on business, understanding the business, but then there's the weeds of getting into the architecture and what's actually happening behind the scenes. So that's where you have your solution architects, technical architects, BAs, and others supporting within that experience, identifying all the integrations, what's the system data model going to look like, and ultimately getting down to the user stories and acceptance criteria, because that is what's necessary to deliver and hand over to a developer or an admin. So we see a lot of those documentations, again, being siloed, right? Some organizations don't even create design documents. They'll just say, hey, we give you user stories and acceptance criteria because we don't have the bandwidth or capacity to give you a technical design spec. A lot of times, acceptance criteria is maybe lacking in certain areas or missing key details that ultimately results in missed requirements later on. So when you're going into like sprint demos, clients will say, hey, I thought this was supposed to be here. And in that case, it was a missed requirement. So that tends to be a big driver for red projects in my own experience. And then lastly, when I think about kind of the milestones in a project, the period right before build is a really key milestone. And that's making sure that after we've sold the deal, now we've gone through the design and architecture. Now we need to validate that what we design reflect what was sold in pre-sales. Is there a gap? Is there more scope that needs to be accounted for? Is there some changes to the integrations that we need to account for, or other data migration needs that may not be kind of represented in the statement of work? That becomes an area of contention, especially if it doesn't get addressed earlier on. And that's where we see there's a lot of limited sign-offs and governance around that in kind of a lot of organizations today. Now, going back to the Salesforce customers, right? If you work for a company that has just Salesforce and you're part of the either IT team or you're a BA, this is kind of where governance is needed internally to make sure that we understand what's being asked by the business. How are we prioritizing those asks? How are we structuring them from the perspective of globalized requirements versus specialized requirements for a specific team, right? Especially if it's a big Salesforce org, there might be hundreds or thousands of users, and you can't cater to every single individual's needs because it might conflict with other teams. So that governance is necessary to make sure that what's being spec'd and designed is not going to create technical debt or issues down the road. So that's another key area there before we get into build. Now, build is an interesting phase. Obviously, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where all the documentation and all the theoretical information now takes face, and you can actually see it. And that's typically an exciting time for customers and even for business stakeholders that go into sprint demos or if they're super users. So in terms of what we're focused on and what we're going to cover today, the build is maybe. We won't get into too much detail because there's a lot of products that we'll cover that support builds from an AI standpoint. But a lot of times, you have to staff devs, admins, QA folks to make sure that they're building against a set of user stories that are prioritized by sprint. And oftentimes there's spillover, and when we get into things like if it's a brownfield org that comes with its own sets of complexity. If there's parallel development or testing initiatives that have to be taken account, that tends to be a little bit more confusing. But we'll cover a few tools that Salesforce provides or that Salesforce is building that will support the build phase as well. And last but not least is the testing and deployment. This is when it all comes together. We see this as kind of the opportunity for projects to either drag or go live without a hitch. Obviously, that includes SIT and UAT testing and all the specific planning that has to go into testing, all the documentation required, like test scripts, and then there's the actionable tests of conducting SIT and UAT, triaging those defects and enhancements, and building and fixing those defects, and then ultimately there's that go and no go decision. And that's either where you go live, where you're using either a deployment tool or some sort of manual change set type of approach, or somewhere in the middle, right? So there's a lot that can go wrong with deployments, especially with complex orgs, and even beyond the initial release, right? A lot of organizations that are managing and maintaining their org oftentimes are maybe not using some of the best practices when it comes to deployments and making changes in production, and there's a mismatch between prod and UAT and all these sorts of things that manifest themselves later on in the future. But I don't want to share too much PTSD because I've experienced it a lot, and I want to focus on the good stuff. But curious to hear from the audience. I mean, does this make sense? Is this like what I've just described? Is that what you've experienced before? I want to make sure that this is in alignment with with what folks think. I see some nodding heads. I'll take that as a yes, and we'll keep going. Did somebody want to say something?
Yeah, so mostly it's the same. So I agree with you.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm glad I got your vote of confidence here. So jumping right in, what is Cluebot? Again, Cluebot is a agentic platform that enables technologists and consultants with managing software implementation, including Salesforce. And in this experience that I'm showing here on the screen, it's carrying over the same framework from the last slide, but we've made a few changes. One, we've introduced a concept of Cluebot agents against the regular traditional persona. So Cluebot has 4 agents that support the SDLC. One is a pre-sales agent, one is a BA agent, a solution architect agent, and then a QA agent. We have a separate slide that gets into the specifics of each one, but they support their respective portions of the SDLC and do what they do best to ensure things like sales to delivery happens without a hitch, that the scope that we're defining during the proposal period is accurate. There's no gaps in SOWs. We have the right assumptions and guardrails in place. And ultimately, making sure that when the delivery team gets to kick off this project, it's kicking off with the right foot forward. And that's where the BA agent kind of picks things up. The BA agent has the ability to understand all forms of unstructured data, understand when a call happens, here's the details of the call, and basically establish a understanding of what is it that we're trying to do. What's the scope? What gaps are there? What questions should we be asking the customer, or what questions should we be asking the business stakeholders to make sure that we're understanding their needs correctly? Not only that, it also has the ability to create project plans, your BRDs, business requirement matrices, business process flow diagrams. I've highlighted a couple deliverables that I believe are usually more of like the icing on the cake. A lot of organizations don't even have the capacity to even think about those types of artifacts that we can produce through our application for you. From here, that's where the solution architect agent kind of picks up. Once we have a full understanding of what the business is trying to do, we've answered a lot of those business focused questions. Now it's time to get into the weeds of the technical side. Let's understand the boundary systems. Let's understand the specifics of the org. If this is a brownfield org, we need to make sure that the aspects of the org are taken into account when making future architectural decisions. So Cluebot can connect to a Salesforce sandbox and analyze and understand what's in that sandbox and make recommendations based off of what's in that sandbox as well. We produce ERD diagrams based off of the data model that is outlined. What are the standard and custom objects? What are all the different fields that will be associated with those objects? Automations that we need to consider. And then the last but not least, we want to make sure we have user stories and acceptance criteria, because that is truly the final stage that is needed in order to hand and ship things off to a developer and admin to ultimately go ahead and build forward. So think of Cluebot as your sidekick. Right? It's there to enable BAs, admins, solution architects, product owners, a lot of different personas to help them do their job more efficient, help them reduce the manual mundane tasks. I remember as an analyst, I never enjoyed taking notes on a call. I never enjoyed having to create requirements, 100+ requirement documents. It was never fun, right? So it was definitely a barrier to kind of learning the ropes. But Cluebot is essentially your junior BA or junior solution architect that's supporting you and riding shotgun with you as you're kind of progressing in whatever aspect that you're doing. The build portion is in dark blue, and that's because we're going to cover that separately. We believe as part of what Cluebot is, the mission of Cluebot is the ARCOps is the main focus. There's a lot of tools that Salesforce themselves are building to support devs and admins as they kind of progress in their own journey within the platform. But the key here is the outputs that Cluebot creates in terms of user stories, acceptance criteria, and tasks are consumable by things like Agentforce for developers to ultimately help streamline and kind of bridge that gap. Lastly, testing and deployment. Again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, this is a critical period that oftentimes results in either project delays or even sometimes long-term delays, or hopefully an on-time go live. What our QA agent does is it takes all the user stories and understanding of the business processes and curates a set of test scripts that are in alignment with kind of what the business is looking for. Obviously, as an end user, you have the capability to go and tweak and modify, prompt, and kind of get it to refined to be even further to ultimately kind of meet what the goals are. From there, it will have the capability to either kind of push this to like a testing platform or download it in terms of like a spreadsheet or Word document that you can ultimately test offline or even test and kind of validate within the platform. But high level, wanted to kind of share a quick vision of how Cluebot sits and fits within the software development lifecycle. I know it's a lot to take in, and I was contemplating how do I visually represent this, but I think the most visual representation will be the demo itself, so you can't beat the demo. But before I keep going, are there any questions, thoughts, aha moments that anybody has that they would like to share?
I'm excited for the demo, but I do like to know where organizations get their name. Is there any meaning behind the name?
There is, and I'll have Akshay share the genius behind the name.
So basically, my first company was called Cluebot, which I was mentioning, and we were building a no-code platform for the construction sector. So while building the company, we were troubled with the implementation challenges because companies often did not have the IT skills required to use a no-code framework and build applications themselves. So it became our burden, and we faced that pain point for 4 years since the company was running, and then we did some internal pilot to use Gen AI and accelerate this implementation process, and that's where the Cluebot X comes. And a bit more origin story for Cluebot is it was more like a cluster and collaborate kind of fusion, where we're trying to enhance collaboration across multiple teams, and that was basically the idea. So long story short, it's multiple things, but we also call it as a get a clue with a bot because we were building the applications deployed on chatbots using WhatsApp.
Cool.
Well, thanks, Akshay, for that fun fact. Awesome. Well, I'll keep going. I want to really quickly cover a couple tools that Salesforce has quietly been building on the side, and then obviously with Agentforce, there's been a whole slew of tools that they've come up with. There are 6 key capabilities that Salesforce is building, and they're in various stages of maturity. I've listed them in the order they've been released. I won't cover a lot in terms of the detail here, but just want to make everybody here aware that Salesforces have capabilities that can be leveraged, whether you are trying to kind of modify and build custom Apex, or you want to analyze a specific feature, kind of do like an org health assessment, or you want to create dummy data for Sandbox. Salesforce has built a suite of products that will be able to support folks at scale. So where we see Cluebot kind of interfacing with this suite of products is essentially we will be the handoff point for the Agentforce for developers, allowing that to kind of progress forward and take on the what we call YAML structure, YAML config format, and essentially build against that within Salesforce, allowing for that seamless kind of a transition with Salesforce. One thing I'll cover it a bit in the demo, but we focus a lot on integrations and making sure this is a connected approach. So various organizations use various tools, but we have integrations with Jira and Confluence. We also are finalizing our Salesforce integration, like I mentioned earlier, where we can connect to a Sandbox to establish more of a streamlined experience. And we're always adding more integrations as well to our platform. But just wanted to level set here. Anybody, by show of hands, or anybody willing to share, have you used any of these tools previously prior to this call? Okay, it doesn't sound like anybody has used it, and it's probably no surprise they're pretty new. So I figured I would ask. Moving right along, I wanted to leave you all with a tidbit around, as Cluebot is an AI platform, we wanted to kind of provide a checklist of what are some of the things you should be looking at when evaluating platforms like Cluebot, and hopefully making an informed decision that will support yourselves as independent consultants, or your firms that you work for, or the companies that you work for. One big area, and I'll try to cover them very quickly just in the interest of time. The SDLC can vary a lot depending on organization, and is finding a tool that aligns with your approach, that is flexible enough to deliver based off of your style, is key. At Cluebot, we have 2 primary delivery mechanisms. One is more of a full-fledged project, and we'll kind of walk through that today. And there's a second experience that's more of an ad hoc. We want to do a quick enhancement. We want to just define the specs and the requirement details and the user story details for a specific function. It's very localized and very specific. That's a little bit more quicker. So we have the flexibility to support organizations at various capacities, but it's something that folks should definitely consider, because the tool should never limit your business processes. Again, there's always ways to follow best practices. So you definitely don't want to carry over bad processes, but to the extent of your processes are good, you definitely want the tool to be able to support you there. You definitely want a tool that understands your platform, right? I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know if, I mean, I've used ChatGPT and Claude and others, and I believe the last session that was conducted last week was a gentleman kind of walked through, ChatGPT and some capabilities on prompting. But I think the fact of the matter is having a platform that really understands Salesforce and the capabilities of Salesforce is critical, because nobody has the time to go and validate beyond just the basics of, okay, are these recommendations correct? Are we recommending process builder when we shouldn't be considering process builder anymore? These kinds of things can be problematic at scale, right? I mean, ChatGPT and Claude are phenomenal tools, especially at the individual level. But when we talk about institutionalized AI usage, that doesn't always cut it. So I just want to also make that reference. Document quality is key. So when it comes to what outputs are you creating, especially if they're client facing, definitely look at what are the capabilities around their generation of outputs. What type of outputs can they produce? What inputs do they require from you? Do you have to provide a slew of we'll call them knowledge library content in order for it to produce good outputs, or can it produce good outputs out of the box, maybe with some manual updates from your end? Integration readiness is key, right? What investments are they making around integrations to the platforms that you care about? So instead of this platform becoming a pointed solution, how can it become part of an integrated workflow to support you and your teams? The next one is really key to me. When I think of AI 2 years ago, it felt like a black box. You give it something and it gives you something back, but it wasn't, you didn't really know what was going on behind the scenes and how to track and what is actually going on in there. So at Cluebot, we believe that being able to track version history, what changes are being made by users, and what the system is recommending is key to making sure that the system understands and the individual also understands and are in sync. And we'll cover that in the demo. Collaboration and control. AI, in my opinion, isn't intended to replace people. I think human in the loop is very much needed to make sure what is produced is accurate. So you'll see in the demo kind of all the opportunities for that human feedback in the loop and how it bridges that gap between AI and human and how they can partner together to be very quick and successful. And then I think this last one is very important to a lot of folks, and as it should be. Nobody wants PII data to be leaked. Nobody wants their organizational specific secrets to be put out there. And again, going back to the black box example I mentioned earlier, especially when we're working with vended LLMs, organizations sometimes have their own risk factors that ultimately result in them maybe not taking or adopting to AI quicker. So at Cluebot, we have enterprise grade suite of capabilities to support enterprise organizations, like bring your own LLMs, building a trust layer, things like that. So if that is something of interest, we're happy to talk through that at a later time. But I just want to share with you all, as you maybe are considering or looking at AI tools for your own consumption. These are some items just to think through and consider as well. Alrighty, so this is where the fun part begins. I'm going to lay the groundwork and foundation of the demo, and we'll jump into the system in the next couple minutes. So as I mentioned before, Cluebot has 4 agents, and they all work together to drive efficiency and productivity throughout the software development lifecycle, starting from pre-sales and the creation of the necessary artifacts and information needed to ensure a deal is won and a customer is satisfied, not only just winning the deal, but also creating a high quality, high fidelity output. Right now, I like to call our agent more of a pre-sales light agent because it's more focused around documentation. But the full-fledged agent is something on the horizon, meaning ability to kind of drive estimations and resource management, all that stuff. But that is more of a phase 2 for us. The next one is the BA agent. Like I mentioned before, they can take unstructured data like transcripts, notes, screenshots, a 2-year-old stale documentation and try to make sense of it. But really anything is fair game. And it takes all that and tries to make sense of it and ask the right questions. What are the questions we should go back to the customer or the business stakeholders to make sure that we're not missing any requirements, or we're not we're taking everything that needs to be taken into account for face value. And then the solution architect agent is really where the details of the specifics of Salesforce comes in, right? Analyzing the metadata, if there's an existing kind of a brownfield experience, what is all the automation that we need to build in terms of flows, or do we need to build Apex, and all that good stuff. Starts to curate documentation around architecture diagrams, all the boundary systems, all the integration needs, how the integrations will kind of operate back and forth. What does the ERD look like around in terms of data model? Starts to create a data dictionary, and then ultimately getting down to user stories and acceptance criteria. And that's where the handoff happens to an admin or developer, or Salesforce agents to go continue that seamless transition into build. And then from there, the testing agent or our QA agent is able to produce test scripts and scenarios based off of the specifics of the user stories and business requirements that can then be taken forward. So really eliminating a lot of the manual mundane tasks that goes into all forms of documentation. I mean, nobody likes to document. I'll be the first to admit it, but it's such a key task that it's just, you can't afford to not do it at all. So that is the high level of in terms of from the demo perspective. We'll be covering those types of agents. And the case study that I mentioned before, in terms of kind of where organizations struggled previously and how tools like Cluebot can be very, very efficient. Here on the top, I call out the different personas that might be relevant: BA, solution architect, product owner, maybe even the IT counterparts. And oftentimes in our own conversations with folks interested in Cluebot, or just understanding the business needs, is teams are limited. People wear multiple hats. Sometimes your admin is also your BA, who's also your QA person, and they don't have the time to go document. They may not even be documenting the right stuff. And the worst case here is building things that should not be built. Building custom automation, or customizing the data model when you could be leveraging out of the box. So these kinds of things often result in technical debt that should not be there to begin with. Not only that, it takes a long time to get that iterative feedback from the business, and ultimately, from my own experience, can take weeks just to go from the initial session or call with the business and ultimately to a specs that are ready to be handed off to a developer admin. With Cluebot, I say 1 or 2 days. It's honestly, technically speaking, it's minutes, but there's a process around it. So all the feedback and all the inputs required, obviously, requires human input, and that's where we come with 1 to 2 days for more of that enhancement, managed services type of use case. Obviously, for a full-fledged implementation, the discovery will definitely take more than 1 to 2 days. But what we're trying to communicate here is it can definitely reduce the time 60-70% of the way. So with that being said, I will shift over to Cluebot. This is where the fun part begins. So let me know if you can see my screen. Again, do you see a new UI?
Yes.
Yes.
Alrighty. So I'll try to orient us on a couple things. Cluebot, we use a few terminologies that I want to kind of orient us on. We have a term called workspace, and a workspace is a container for a project. In this case, the company or the account is called Acme, and we're doing a health cloud and experience cloud implementation for Acme Corporation. Acme Corporation happens to be a hospital system, and basically the inputs that went into this example was a 30-minute transcript of a dummy discovery call where we dug into what is Acme Corporation and what are they trying to do. And it turns out they're looking to do a provider management experience in terms of kind of managing those providers within Salesforce, within Health Cloud, and then having a Experience Cloud portal to support some of the self-service capabilities and some of the credential management pieces. So I won't get too much into the weeds of the use case in case folks here are not fully into healthcare, but just wanted to share a little bit of context around what we've provided. Cluebot also has a ability to also provide manual text prompts. So you can, you see here I have a bunch of information within here. Once we analyze, or this is the main page of the experience. One thing I'm actually not showing here is to create this workspace. There's a workspace creation journey where it asks you questions like, what product is this for? We'll say Salesforce. What clouds are you using? Experience Cloud, Health Cloud, and then it will try to distill things like what are the epics and features that are relevant. So we'll curate a list, and you kind of select some of those. And that helps inform the system as it's trying to go from a 50,000-foot view down to the weeds of what your team will build or take on for development purposes. So this page is really where the BA agent or pre-sales agent might be more involved. On the right side, we have the AI assist, where it starts to understand and define gaps. It started asking about EHR integration. You see here the solution recommendation. This is ensuring the future plan of HR integration aligns with Salesforce Health Cloud, because I told it that the HR integration needs to come down the hopper. It's not going to be in phase one. You can either accept or ignore. So we've built some interactive components here to allow the user to kind of interface with the question the system has. The system will generate a score, right? So the higher the score, that means the inputs are good, and it means the outputs will also hopefully be good as well. So this kind of gives the user an experience to either accept or reject some of these questions that the system kind of is asking about. Maybe there's just questions on approvals or questions about what specific forms need to be captured in Experience Cloud. Those are the kinds of questions that the tool will provide, and it's intelligent enough to know what stage you are in the project. So if you are in a pre-sales motion, we don't really care about the specific fields, right? But if we're in details of discovery, we want to know what the specific fields are. What are the specifics of the automation? What are the approvals that we need? Who are the approvers? What is the approval criteria? Those kinds of information are critical to ensure that the user stories are complete. So once we've answered the questions that are in the system, we can proceed forward, where the tool will start to curate a high-level understanding of what is it that we're trying to do. It tries to kind of pinpoint a direction, right? We want to go northeast, so let's head northeast. And it'll come up with three major frameworks: standard, advanced, and hybrid. Standard is more declarative, advanced uses some customization, and hybrid is more of a do-it-yourself approach. Every single page that we're going to cover today is editable at every level, because again, we believe that human feedback mechanism is key to make sure that we're not going away from northeast. We're going northeast, so we want to stick to northeast. So in this case, we're sticking with the standard method. All the text that you see here is all dynamic based off of the inputs that were provided. We're constantly looking at ways to make this more consumable, so would love to hear feedback. Feel free to add feedback in the comments. We love feedback. So if there's something that you think could be done better, or something you just think is absolutely wrong, we will not be offended. So the first section here is what I'd liken to a data that goes into a proposal or an SOW. So this is some of the outputs that the pre-sales agent creates. The pre-sales agent Lite, if you will, puts a perspective around what the company, a little bit more about Acme Corporation, what are some of their business needs, what's the driver behind this whole experience, and high-level scope of implementation, and then expected outcomes and benefits from the solution. And again, this is all editable. So if you feel like something is a little bit off, you can modify it. But this type of information can be taken in and fed into an SOW template, or you can upload an SOW template. I'll walk you through also what is our knowledge library in a few minutes, and kind of explain kind of how you can use that to create specific outputs in your own way. Really quickly, before I show you the scope and approach, we have an out of scope section as well as an assumption section. So when I talk about that black box earlier, this is the system trying to give you a perspective in how it's thinking. So if there's assumptions here that are like, very off in your opinion, then you can go delete them. You can add more assumptions. You can actually add assumption libraries in the knowledge library, so the system can take that into account. But this is all based off of out of the box, our proprietary capabilities, but you'll have your own ability to add more to it. The last section that I skipped over very quickly is the scope and approach. This is where the system starts to break down the functionality into sizable chunks. It looks at them at modules and process levels. So you'll see here there's 5 modules. kind of addressing this provider management use case that we talked about earlier. So there's the onboarding management and so on and so forth. So if we open one of these, for example, it'll give you the details of the specific module as well as what are the different processes involved. So you see here, there's 2 business processes tied to the provider management module, profile management and referral management. We can double click into one of them where you see current state, target state capabilities. Again, this is all based off of the call transcript. So if the information is there, it'll be fed into here, or if the information is missing, it'll be asked in terms of questions by the BA agent. The system will then start to create requirements tied back to each of these modules and processes, and that's going to be the input into what the business requirements document looks like on the next page. But you can double click and edit each line item. You can add a new line item. You can delete a whole line item. Just kind of depends on what the needs are. But again, giving that user an opportunity to modify and tweak and give them that level of flexibility. From here, I know we were running out of time, so I want to kind of run through this pretty quickly. This is the business requirements document matrix. It looks at, and apologies if this is really small, I'll try to zoom in a little bit, but it looks at what are all the different capabilities that we're looking at from a Salesforce perspective. So platform features, health cloud features, if there's integrations, things like that, it'll be captured here for ease of use or ease of understanding. And then on the left side, we tried to maintain the same experience, right? We talked about 5 modules and 10 business processes earlier. So the experience moving forward will take into account the modules and processes as well. So you see here, we have 3 line items that have a green checkbox. That means those have already been generated. The ones that have an arrow means they have not been generated yet. So you can generate at the individual process level, giving you an opportunity to kind of modify and tweak as you see fit, and then generate the next version, or you can generate them all at the same time if you'd like. But this just gives user that level of granularity that they might typically want to have. But you see here, there's a bunch of requirements that get generated. From here, we get into building business process flow diagrams. Again, keeping up on what I mentioned earlier, you can see here we've generated 2 processes: credential verification and then referral management process. You can see that we have one more that we can generate now called provider data intake process. But then all the other ones are not available. They all have a lock mechanism on them because you did not generate the earlier page, so you cannot generate this yet. This just gives users a structured approach to navigating through the end-to-end experience without it becoming overbearing or too complicated. We define personas and roles for those personas and specifics of those personas. And that becomes key because that's what reflects in the process diagrams. You'll see here, we capture, I'll show you the diagram first, and then I'll scroll back up. So each diagram is represented in a table. So you can actually go in and modify steps. You can add new steps, you can delete steps, and that will update the diagrams directly. We're also exploring ways to make this more dynamic, to more of a lucid chart type of experience. But right now, it's a bit limited with kind of managing it at the table level. Here's another example, right? We've generated the referral management process. This is all based off of one 30-minute call. I'll keep reiterating that. So if there's something that looks like an inaccuracy, it's probably because it's based off of a 30-minute call with limited human intervention. From here, the system generates a technical design. The technical design lives at the account level because that's a living and breathing document. So when I mentioned earlier, ARCOPS, this is what I mean. This type of documentation that the system maintains behind the scenes for you as a user of the system without having to go and make 10 different modifications in 10 different spots for the same thing. So the system starts to kind of look at what are all the standard objects and custom objects that we should be exploring. And it starts to curate a data dictionary of those objects, each object individually, and what are the different fields that we need, data type, help text if needed, if is it mandatory or not. So giving you that Excel-like feel. Everybody likes Excel. So we want to give you that Excel-like feel to basically make those changes. You can double click and make changes. You can delete a row, add a new row, and it becomes a pretty seamless experience. Let me scroll. I want to show you one more thing on this page before we keep going. So we also generate ERD diagram right now that represents how the data model all is connected and how it kind of works together. It's not perfect in this example because from a solution architect standpoint, we only had 30 minutes with the customer, and we didn't make a lot of course correction. So there might be some fixes required, but just conceptually speaking, this would be the ERD that would be represented by the system. We're also building an architecture diagram, like I mentioned before. It's not represented in this demo right now. And then last but not least are the user stories. So we begin to generate user stories for the user. You can delete a user story, add a new user story, modify a user story, and you can modify them at each level, the acceptance criteria. We also generate tasks, and these tasks are what we call more like pseudocode that kind of gives users or novice admins or developers the capability to kind of do their task in a more guided fashion. And in the future, this is something that could be picked up by a AI agent from, like, say, Agentforce, for example, and build that specific function directly in Agentforce. And that is the wrap of a very quick demo. I want to spend the last 5 minutes giving folks an opportunity to ask questions, give us feedback, and ask more questions. So I'll open it up to the floor. Or actually, if there's anything in the comments that you want to cover, we can do that as well.
No, I think so far we don't have any comments, so we can wait for we can directly ask the audience to ask questions, and we
Okay.
can have it interactive.
I got a couple of questions. So, first question. So, when you guys are generating the solutions and coming up to the design level, so let's say company have some they are already guidelines, frameworks, patterns. Are you already considering any of those stuff during that phase? So, this is something that we have to.
Yes. Yes, I thank you for reminding me, because I was going to show you one more thing and I totally did not show it to you. So that's a great segue. So we have a component called Knowledge Library, and that's where organizations can provide their own flavor of what they want the system to generate. So we have all these different types of tags around inputs. So you can say, I want to provide out of scope and assumptions, right? I want this for an SOW, for example, or I have specifics around how user story should be defined. These are the epics and features that I would want you to consider, or similar type of information. Or if you have like historical project data that you want the system to understand, that can also be ingested here. I want to point out two things. One, you can manually add stuff here within the knowledge library, but as part of our Jira and Confluence integration, we can actually tap into Confluence and look at information that's already in Confluence and have the system reference that as well. We're also constantly looking at expanding it to like Teams and other platforms, but just conceptually would operate in the same fashion. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, good. And one more. So, is the tool already connected to any Salesforce org? Like how it work with metadata and what is the capability?
Yeah. So when by the time your organization will be on the system, the answer will be yes. It's still in our own testing, so we haven't pushed it to our beta, but it's kind of nearing completion.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Yusuf. Thanks, and guest session. Okay.
Any other questions?
So I had one. In the first part of the demo, when you ingested the notes, it then brought up some functionality where it was suggesting additional questions. Is the thought that the BA or someone else, whoever collected the information, would be on the phone with that person or in person using the application, or how is the interaction?
Yeah.
Because to go back and say, oh well, I have another question and another question. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So it can be in many different ways. It could be offline, like via email, or it could be live on a call. This is just the basics of how we envision the questions to be, but we very much have a component that will be kind of live on the call. So it would even give you questions in real time. So if you're on a call with a customer, in the future, it'll kind of give you questions in real time. I just want to clarify that's not ready yet, but we're building the foundations to make sure that questions are correct, and we're making sure that the responses are clear, and then that piece will be layered in the near future.
Cool.
Yeah. Can I ask you a quick question, Don?
Yeah.
Do you see an experience where potential customer would want to maybe have an experience, like for example, you give them like a portal type of access where they might be able to interface with kind of what you've produced? Because we've heard folks say that to us and say, hey, we would love to be able to surface some of this to our clients without having to download a Word doc, for example. Curious if that's something that you've experienced or curious to hear what your thoughts are.
I haven't personally. I don't think my 2 customers are big enough. So,
Okay.
It's probably a better question for another audience.
No worries.
But yeah.
We are thinking of having an integration with a note taker to like read.io or something like that. It takes certain time for it to complete the transcript creation, and then as soon as that is done, it will automatically pull it into the system, so that you just give a couple of minutes time, and it will then be able to ask the questions. So that's one experience which
that's definitely like the short term. Like if you're using a note taker today, you can put that transcript into the system as a short term solution. But yeah, definitely having that connectivity and real time inputs is on our radar.
Yeah, I like it. I like having everything in one place. With the process maps, is that something that you're going to be working on to get a little bit more detail there, or what?
Yeah, so establishing a more end-to-end process diagram is something that we're trying to crack. I think the biggest challenge is making sure that the system really understands the full end-to-end from a business standpoint, and not just at the process level. So the short answer is yes, we'd like to see it to be more expanded, but also it gives the user an opportunity to modify and tweak as well as they see fit.
Fair. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? I know we have 1 minute left, but happy to spend a few more minutes if folks have more questions.
Yeah, Virat had another question in the chat. Is there any trial version to test it?
That's a great question. Akshay, I'll let you take that one on.
So in fact, I was just going to mention that we will be offering free access to the folks here for attending the session. I'll in fact put the link to this right now. So please fill up a waitlist form which we have created, and then we'll give you priority access. So the beta is going to go live on 15th May, and then we'll reach out to you folks and give you access. So up to $500 of free credits will be available to all of you.
Yeah, and to Akshay's point, like we're managing a pretty large list right now of companies, but we definitely feel like the individuals that and the independent consultants are important as well, and getting their feedback is key. So definitely sign up and try it out for yourself.
And do give us feedback. So the more you give feedback, the product will improve.
Nice. So thank you, Akshay and Omar, for doing this session. It is a great. This tool is so. It is amazing. When Akshay do the presentation for me, like the demo for me, I was like, okay, let's do a session because it is like an advanced tool. So I hope everyone enjoyed, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a good day. Bye.
Yeah, you too. Bye.